Have you ever been so desperate that you'd beg a stranger to take someone you love more than life itself, just to save them from a fate worse than death? In 1877, a young woman stood in the dust of a Montana mining town and spoke words that would change 3 lives forever. What she didn't know was that the cowboy standing before her carried wounds deeper than hers, and her plea would become the beginning of something none of them could have imagined. Before we dive into the story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more shocking stories tomorrow. Also, leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let's continue with the story. Eliza Brennan stood in the yard of the Last Chance Saloon. As dawn broke over Copper Ridge, her hands trembling despite her efforts to stay calm. The man before her, Caleb Wilder, had arrived expecting a simple business transaction. Instead, he'd walked into something far more twisted. Inside the saloon, her sister Rose waited with their father, who had maybe days left to live. The old man had gambled away their land deed in a poker game 3 nights ago, and the winner, a mine operator named Gideon Falk, had made his terms clear. He'd cancel the debt if one of the Brennan daughters married him. No ceremony, no courtship. Just ownership disguised as matrimony. Eliza had volunteered immediately. Rose was only 19, gentle and prone to illness. She deserved better than a lifetime shackled to a man who collected people like property. But Falk had played them all. He'd told Caleb the Brennan land was for sale, legitimate and clean. Now Caleb stood between Eliza and the saloon door, his jaw tight as Falk emerged with that snake oil smile. "The arrangement stands, Wilder," Falk said, thumbs hooked in his vest. "One of these girls settles the debt, or I take everything. The land, the house, and I'll make sure their father dies in the street." Eliza's voice cracked when she spoke, hating herself for the words. "Please, can you take my sister instead of me?" The question hung in the cold morning air. She wasn't asking Caleb to marry Rose. She was begging him to save her sister from Falk by any means necessary. If Caleb bought the land and took Rose away, at least one of them would escape. Caleb's gray eyes moved from Eliza to Falk, then back again. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man who'd already lost too much. "I'm not taking either one of them." Eliza's heart dropped. She'd failed. Rose would be trapped, and she'd be helpless to stop it. Then Caleb turned to Falk, and something dangerous flickered across his face. "But I am buying that land. And when I do, I'm hiring both these women to work my ranch until they can afford to buy it back themselves." Falk's smile vanished. Falk's face turned the color of a prairie sunset. "You're making a mistake, Wilder." "Then it's mine to make." Caleb pulled a leather pouch from his coat and counted out bills on the saloon's hitching post. "That's twice what the land's worth. Take it or explain to the territorial judge why you're forcing women into marriage to settle gambling debts." A crowd had gathered, miners, shopkeepers, even the sheriff, leaning against the jailhouse across the street. Falk's reputation relied on fear, but public shame was something different entirely. He snatched the money, his smile gone cold. "You just made yourself an enemy you can't afford, Wilder. This town belongs to me. That silver mine funds half the businesses here, and those mountains are mine too, whether the maps say so or not. Then I guess we'll see who's still standing when the dust settles." Caleb's voice never rose, but something in it made Falk step back. The mine operator left, his boots kicking up dust as he stormed toward his horse. Eliza stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. No man in Copper Ridge helped anyone without expecting payment in flesh or servitude. Yet this stranger had just challenged the most dangerous man in the territory for 2 women he'd never met. "Get your father and your sister," Caleb said, already moving toward his wagon. "We leave now, before he changes his mind about doing this legal." Rose appeared in the saloon doorway, supporting their father between herself and the barkeep. The old man looked gray, his breathing shallow. Caleb lifted him into the wagon bed without a word, arranging blankets around him with surprising gentleness. "Why would you do this?" Rose's voice was barely a whisper. Her dark eyes, so different from Eliza's, searched Caleb's face for the trap they both expected. He didn't answer, just climbed onto the wagon seat and waited. Eliza helped Rose up, then pulled herself beside them. As they rolled out of Copper Ridge toward the mountains, she studied Caleb's profile. His hands were steady on the reins, but his shoulders carried a tension that spoke of old wounds. "Your ranch," she finally said. "What's it like?" "Broken." The word came out flat. "Fences down, cattle scattered. My brother and I have been barely holding it together since our parents died." "Then why take on more trouble?" Caleb was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was softer. "Because if I don't, I'll forget why I'm still trying." Rose leaned against Eliza, exhausted. Behind them, their father's breathing rattled in his chest. Ahead, the Tobacco Root Mountains rose like jagged teeth against the sky. Eliza realized they were riding toward either salvation or a different kind of prison. And she had no idea which, until it was too late to turn back. The Wilder Ranch appeared through the pines like something out of a nightmare. Bullet holes scarred the front door. Windows were patched with canvas that flapped in the wind. Fences lay in collapsed heaps, and the barn door hung rubsed on broken hinges. A young man emerged from the house, rifle in hand. He couldn't have been more than 17, with the same gray eyes as Caleb, but a face hardened by anger. "What the hell is this?" He pointed the rifle at the wagon. "You brought strangers here?" "Jesse, put it down." Caleb climbed off the wagon, his voice tired. They needed help. "We need help!" Jesse's voice cracked. "We can't even feed ourselves, and you're collecting strays like some kind of saint?" Eliza helped Rose down while the brothers faced off. Their father groaned in the wagon bed, and she knew they had to get him inside soon. "They'll work for their keep," Caleb said. "We need hands, and they need a place to stay. It's business." Jesse laughed, bitter and sharp. "Business, right. Just like helping the Hendersons was business? Just like standing up to Falk's men was business? How'd that work out for Ma and Pa?" The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. His shoulders stiffened, but he didn't respond, just turned and started lifting their father from the wagon. That first night, Eliza couldn't sleep. The house was cold, the walls thin enough to carry voices. She heard Jesse and Caleb arguing in the next room. "You can't save everyone," Jesse said. "You couldn't save them, and you won't save these women either. All you'll do is get us all killed. Then I'll keep trying until I get it right." Caleb's response was quiet, almost defeated. "I have to. You don't have to do anything except survive. But you won't even do that, will you? You'd rather die trying to fix what happened than actually live." Footsteps, a door slamming, then silence. Eliza stared at the ceiling, understanding settling over her like cold water. Caleb wasn't rescuing them out of kindness. He was trying to redeem himself for something that still ate him alive. They weren't people to him. They were penance. In the small bedroom down the hall, Rose coughed. It was a wet, rattling sound that made Eliza's chest tighten. She'd heard that cough before, from their mother in the months before she died. Morning came gray and cold. Their father's breathing had worsened overnight. Jesse avoided looking at any of them, saddling his horse in silence. Caleb handed Eliza a pair of work gloves. "Fences need mending. Creek's a half-mile north for water. There's tools in the barn." No welcome. No sympathy. Just work. Eliza pulled on the gloves, feeling blisters form before she'd even started. Behind her, Rose coughed again, and Eliza wondered if they'd escaped Falk, only to die slowly in these mountains instead. Their father died on a Tuesday morning, while Rose held his hand. No last words, no final wisdom, just a ragged breath that never came back. They buried him on a hillside overlooking the valley. Caleb dug the grave himself, refusing help. Jesse stood apart, hat in hand, but eyes distant. 4 people at a funeral, and only one of them crying. Rose collapsed as they walked back to the house. Not dramatic, just her legs giving out mid-step. Eliza caught her, feeling how light her sister had become, how her skin burned with fever. "I'm fine," Rose whispered, but her eyes said otherwise. A traveling doctor happened through Copper Ridge 3 days later. Caleb rode to fetch him, paying double to make the trip worth his while. The man examined Rose in the small bedroom, his face growing grimmer by the minute. "Consumption," he said, packing his instruments. "Early stages, but it'll kill her without proper care. She needs rest, good food, dry air, and no physical labor. Even then, there's no guarantees." Eliza felt the floor tilt beneath her. "How much? For medicine? For treatment?" "More than you have." The doctor's voice wasn't unkind, just honest. "I'm sorry." After he left, Eliza stood in the yard, staring at mountains that suddenly felt like prison walls. Everything they'd survived, every sacrifice, and Rose was dying anyway. The universe had a cruel sense of humor. Caleb found her there an hour later. "Doctor says she can stay here. I'll cover what's needed." "Why?" The word came out harsh. "Why do you keep helping us? What do you want?" He was quiet, his jaw working like he was chewing on words too bitter to swallow. Finally, he looked at her. 2 years ago, Falk's men went after a family of settlers squatting on land he wanted. My parents tried to help. They were good people, always helping someone. I was in town buying supplies when it happened." His voice went flat. "By the time I got back, my parents were dead, and the settlers were gone. Falk claimed it was a property dispute that got out of hand. The sheriff called it self-defense. I couldn't prove otherwise." Eliza understood then. The bullet holes in the door, Jesse's anger, the weight Caleb carried in every movement. "I'm not saving you," Caleb said. "I'm just trying to live with what I didn't do." That night, Eliza found him in the barn, mending tack by lantern light. She sat across from him, watching his hands work the leather. "My mother died of consumption when I was 14, she said. "I raised Rose after that. I've been trying to save her my whole life, and I'm still failing." Caleb looked up, and for the first time she saw past the guilt to the person underneath. Someone just as broken as her, just as desperate to fix something that might be beyond fixing. "Maybe we're both trying to save the wrong things," he said. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and distant snow. 3 weeks passed. Rose's color improved with rest and regular meals. Eliza worked until her hands bled, mending fences and hauling water, trying to repay a debt that felt impossible to settle. Jesse remained cold, but started spending evenings teaching Rose to read by lamplight, his voice patient in ways it never was with anyone else. Then Gideon Falk returned. He arrived with 6 armed men, their horses kicking up dust as they surrounded the ranch house. Eliza was at the well when she heard the commotion. By the time she reached the porch, Falk was already talking. "I've come with an offer, Wilder. A generous one." He smiled like a man holding all the cards. "My geologists did some surveys. Turns out your ranch sits on top of a silver vein worth more than this whole valley. I'm willing to pay you $10,000 for the property. Enough to set you and your brother up comfortable anywhere you want to go." $10,000. Eliza's breath caught. That kind of money could save Rose, give them a real future. They could go somewhere warm, somewhere her sister could breathe easy. "Not interested," Caleb said from the doorway. Falk's smile thinned. "You didn't let me finish. The offer includes passage for these ladies. You take them with you, leave Montana, and everybody wins. I get the land, you get rich, and they get a fresh start away from all this unpleasantness." Jesse emerged from the barn, his face hungry. "Caleb, that's a fortune. We could leave this place, start over somewhere that isn't trying to kill us." "This place has our parents' graves," Caleb said. "I'm not selling." "Your parents are dead," Jesse's voice cracked. "Staying here won't bring them back. It'll just get the rest of us killed too." Falk watched the exchange like a man at a poker game, reading every tell. "Think about those girls, Wilder. The sick one especially. How long you think she'll last up here when winter comes? How much good is your pride gonna do when you're burying her next to your folks?" The words hit Eliza like a fist. He was right. Rose wouldn't survive another Montana winter, not in her condition. This was their chance to escape, to actually live instead of just surviving. She looked at Caleb, willing him to see sense, but his jaw was set, his eyes fixed on something only he could see. "Get off my land," he said quietly. Falk's smile vanished completely. "You're a fool, Wilder, and fools don't last long out here." He turned his horse, his men following. "When you change your mind, and you will, the offer drops by $1,000 every week you make me wait." They rode off, leaving silence and dust in their wake. Jesse stared at his brother with something close to hatred. "You're gonna get us all killed for dirt and ghosts." Eliza watched Caleb's face and realized something terrible. He'd just chosen principle over survival, and she was falling in love with a man who would never choose the easy path. The fire started just after midnight on a dry, windy Thursday. Eliza woke to Jesse pounding on her door, shouting about smoke. She stumbled outside in her nightdress to see the southern pasture lit up like hell itself, flames racing across dead grass toward the main herd. Caleb was already running, carrying wet blankets and a shovel. "Get every bucket we have! Move!" The next hours blurred into smoke and pain. They beat at flames with soaked blankets, dug fire breaks with bleeding hands, drove panicked cattle away from the advancing wall of heat. Two ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse fought alongside them, cursing and coughing. Eliza's arms screamed, her lungs burned, but she kept moving. Beside her, Jesse worked with desperate fury, tears streaming down his soot-covered face. Then Rose's rifle cracked from the house. Eliza's head snapped up. Through the smoke, she saw figures near the barn, torches in hand. Falk's men, trying to finish what the pasture fire had started. Rose fired again from the bedroom window, her aim wild but effective enough to scatter them. The men retreated, but Eliza saw her sister collapse against the window frame. By dawn, they'd stopped the fire. Half the herd was lost. The southern range was blackened earth, and smoke still rose in twisted columns. Caleb stood in the ruins, his face dark with ash, and something harder. Eliza found Rose unconscious in the bedroom, the rifle still in her hands. Her breathing was shallow, her fever raging. The effort of defending the barn had broken something inside her that might not heal. We have to leave, Eliza said, when she found Caleb in the yard. Her voice was raw from smoke and tears. Rose won't survive this. We've brought you nothing but trouble, and now she's dying because of it. Caleb turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her step back. You're not trouble. His voice was fierce. You're the only reason I remember why this place matters. Before you came, Jesse and I were just ghosts haunting these buildings, waiting to die. You gave us something to fight for besides revenge and guilt. What good is that if my sister dies? She won't. Caleb grabbed her shoulders, gentle but firm. I won't let her. I won't let Falk win. Not again. Jessie appeared, carrying Rose wrapped in blankets. Her eyes were closed, her breathing labored. She needs the doctor. Now. They loaded Rose into the wagon. As Caleb drove toward town, Eliza watched the smoking ruins of the ranch disappear behind them. Falk had made his move, shown his hand, and somehow, impossibly, they were still standing. Barely, but standing. The real fight, Eliza realized, hadn't even started yet. Falk had tried to burn them out and failed. Next time, he wouldn't be so subtle. Next time, someone was going to die. The doctor kept Rose for 3 days, dosing her with medicine they couldn't afford, and shaking his head about permanent damage to her lungs. When they finally brought her home, she was pale as paper, but awake. I'm done being helpless, she announced from her bed that first evening. Jesse, teach me numbers, bookkeeping. Whatever keeps this ranch running that doesn't need me to lift anything heavier than a pencil. Jesse, sitting in the corner like he'd been doing since they got back, looked up surprised. Why? Because lying here while you all risk your lives is worse than dying. Rose's voice was weak but determined. So either teach me, or I'll drag myself out there and work until I collapse again. Your choice. Something shifted in Jesse's face. He pulled a chair closer and opened the ranch ledger. All right, but if you start coughing, we stop. Deal? Deal. Over the next weeks, they worked together every evening. Rose learned how to track expenses, calculate feed costs, manage breeding records, and Jesse, teaching her, became someone different. Patient, almost gentle. One night, Rose found something in the old records that made her sit up straight. Jesse, look at this. These mining claim documents Falk filed. They overlap with your water rights, but the dates don't match. He filed after your father registered the creek access. Jesse studied the papers, his eyes widening. If we can prove he forged these dates, his whole operation falls apart. He'd lose his water rights, maybe his mining permits too. They took their findings to Caleb, who stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. Hope, Eliza realized. That's what she was seeing on his face. Actual hope for the first time since they'd arrived. Outside, Eliza and Caleb worked to rebuild what the fire had destroyed. The physical labor gave them time to talk. Really talk. He told her about his mother's singing, how she'd hum while cooking, and how the house had felt empty without that sound. She told him about her dream of opening a small bakery someday, somewhere Rose could work without destroying her lungs. One evening on the barn roof, hammering new shingles, Caleb paused. Do you regret it? Staying here instead of taking Falk's money? Eliza looked at the valley stretched below them, painted gold by the setting sun. Every single day, she admitted. And I'd refuse it again every single day. Caleb studied her face, something shifting in his expression. Then he kissed her, gentle and careful, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. When they pulled apart, Eliza rested her forehead against his. We're going to lose everything, aren't we? Maybe, Caleb said, but we'll lose it fighting. Together. Inside the house, Rose and Jesse were laughing over something in the ledger. For the first time since leaving Copper Ridge, Eliza felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Hope. Stupid, reckless hope that maybe they could actually win. The territorial judge agreed to hear their case in Helena. It took 2 weeks to arrange. 2 weeks where Falk's men watched the ranch from the ridge like vultures waiting for something to die. The courtroom was packed. Every rancher and miner with a stake in the outcome had shown up. Falk sat at the front table, relaxed and smiling. His lawyer, a sharp-dressed man from back east. Jesse presented the evidence, his voice steady despite his white knuckles on the table edge. The forged dates, the overlapping claims, the illegal water seizures that had bankrupted 3 other ranches before Caleb's. Then Falk's lawyer stood up, and everything went to hell. Your Honor, my client has documentation proving these claims are legitimate. What we're witnessing here is a desperate attempt by Mr. Wilder to avoid financial ruin, fabricating evidence. Evidence, I might add, provided by a woman he's been living with in sin. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Eliza felt every eye turn toward her. Mr. Wilder has coerced Miss Brennan into false testimony, the lawyer continued, his voice dripping with manufactured concern. She's his mistress, bought and paid for when her father's debts came due. Her sister, too sick to work, remains on the property as insurance of Miss Brennan's cooperation. This isn't a legal dispute. It's a sad tale of exploitation masquerading as romance. Eliza's face burned. The whispers grew louder, uglier. She saw the judge's expression shift from interest to skepticism. Caleb started to stand, his face dark with rage, but Eliza caught his arm. If he exploded now, they'd lose everything. She stood instead, her legs shaking, but her voice clear. Your Honor, may I speak? The judge looked surprised but nodded. Eliza described everything. Her father's gambling, Falk's arrangement, the choice she'd made to save her sister. She laid bare every humiliating detail, feeling her reputation shred with every word. But she didn't stop. Mr. Wilder saved us because he's a better man than anyone in this room, she finished. And if that makes me his mistress in your eyes, then you're all blind to what decency looks like. Before the lawyer could respond, Rose stood at the back of the courtroom. Jesse tried to pull her back down, but she shook him off. I was there the night of the fire, Rose said, her voice thin but carrying. I saw Falk's men trying to burn the barn. I fired the shots that drove them away. And I found the evidence in your client's own records that prove he's been stealing water rights for 2 years. She started coughing, harsh and wet, but kept talking through it. The burn patterns match arson. The sheriff investigated. Check his report. The judge called for the sheriff's documentation. When it arrived, confirming Rose's testimony, Falk's confident smile finally cracked. The judge ruled in Caleb's favor, voiding Falk's water claims and fining him $5,000. But as they left the courthouse, Falk stopped Caleb in the doorway. The law's not the only justice in Montana, Wilder. Remember that. They left Helena at dawn, hoping to make it back before dark. Caleb drove the wagon with Eliza beside him, while Jesse rode ahead on horseback, scouting the trail. The ambush came at Willow Creek Crossing, where the trail narrowed between rock walls. The first shot hit Caleb in the shoulder, knocking him sideways. Eliza grabbed the reins as he slumped against her, blood spreading across his shirt. Jesse's horse screamed and reared. Get down! Jesse yelled, diving off his mount and pulling Caleb from the wagon seat. They crashed behind the wheels as bullets tore through the canvas cover. Eliza counted 6 shooters on the rocks above. Falk stood among them, no longer smiling, just watching with cold satisfaction. Jesse returned fire, his shots precise and calculated. Eliza had never seen him like this, moving with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. He tossed her his rifle. "Load for me, fast as you can." Her hand shook as she worked the mechanism, fumbling cartridges. Caleb groaned beside her, his good hand pressed to his shoulder. The blood wouldn't stop. "You're gonna die here, Wilder!" Falk shouted from above. "All of you. Should have taken my offer when you had the chance." A bullet splintered the wheel inches from Eliza's head. Jesse fired back, and one of Falk's men dropped. Then she heard hoofbeats. Multiple riders coming fast from the east. Neighboring ranchers, the ones who'd stayed silent during the hearing, came thundering into the crossing. Men who'd lost land to Falk's schemes, who'd watched Caleb stand alone and felt ashamed of their own cowardice. The fight turned brutal. Falk's men, caught between Jesse's rifle and the rancher's charge, scattered. 2 went down. The rest ran, dragging their wounded. Falk himself took a bullet in the leg, trying to reach his horse. The sheriff, riding with the ranchers, dismounted and clapped irons on him. "Ambushing people on public roads," the sheriff said. "That's attempted murder, Falk. Your mining days are over." Falk spat blood, his eyes fixed on Caleb. "Montana kills everyone who loves it, Wilder. You'll die here eventually, alone and broke, like you deserve." Caleb, pale from blood loss but conscious, looked at Eliza. At Jesse, who'd fought like a demon to protect them. At the ranchers, who'd finally found their courage. "Maybe," Caleb said, "but I'll die belonging to something. What have you got?" The sheriff hauled Falk away. The ranchers helped get Caleb back in the wagon, offering help with the ranch, sharing livestock to rebuild the herd. As they rode home, Eliza pressed cloth against Caleb's wound, feeling his blood warm on her hands. They'd survived, but barely. Jesse sat silent in the back, staring at his rifle like he didn't recognize it. The cost of winning, Eliza thought, was learning exactly what you were willing to kill for. And she'd learned she was willing to kill for this broken man and his broken brother on this broken piece of Montana earth. 6 months later, the ranch looked different. The fences stood straight, the barn door hung true, and cattle grazed in pastures that had recovered from the fire. The neighboring ranchers, grateful that someone had finally stood up to Falk, had helped rebuild. Shared breeding stock, offered advice and labor. Jesse had changed most of all. The anger that had defined him had burned away in that crossing, replaced by something quieter. He still didn't talk much, but when he did, his words carried weight. Rose brought that out in him, Eliza thought. Her sister's stubborn refusal to be helpless had given him something his brother's guilt never could. A reason to look forward instead of back. Rose's health had improved steadily. The mountain air, proper food, and purpose had strengthened her in ways the doctor hadn't expected. She managed the ranch books now, her neat handwriting filling ledgers that actually balanced. And the way she and Jesse looked at each other when they thought no one was watching suggested something deeper than friendship was growing. Caleb's shoulder had healed, though he carried the scar as a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. He moved easier now, laughed more. The weight he'd carried since his parents' deaths hadn't disappeared, but he'd learned to carry it differently. Eliza had started baking bread to sell in Copper Ridge. Small batches at first, but the miners loved it, and shopkeepers started placing orders. The coins she saved went into a jar buried beneath the floorboards, the beginning of her bakery dream maybe, or just security against the next disaster. One evening, She sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the valley gold and red. Caleb found her there, holding something in his hand. He sat beside her, silent for a moment. Then he opened his palm, revealing a simple gold band. "I never asked properly," he said. "I just sort of assumed you'd stay because you had nowhere else to go. But that's not what I want. I want you to stay because you choose to. As my wife, not my employee, or my penance, or whatever I was trying to make you into when you first got here." Eliza looked at this man, who'd seen her at her most desperate, and chose to help anyway. Who'd fought for her sister like she was his own blood. Who'd taught her that love wasn't always soft and easy. Sometimes it was hard and painful and earned through shared struggle. "I'll stay," she said. "But you're taking us both, remember? Rose and I come as a pair." Caleb laughed, and they kissed as the sun dropped below the mountains. Inside, Rose and Jesse were arguing about something in the ledger, their voices mixing with laughter. That day in Copper Ridge, Eliza had begged a stranger to take her sister instead of her. He'd taken them both, not as debts to be paid, but as people worth fighting for. And in return, they'd given him the only thing they had left. A reason to believe redemption wasn't just possible. It was real. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another story that will remind you why love Asana always finds a way, even in the hardest places. You won't want to miss it.